What's going on, guys? I know it's been a couple weeks, but we are back with the weekly chess quiz. It's not really a weekly quiz anymore, it's just a quiz. But anyway, this is quiz number 14. If you're new here, this is the series where you guys analyze 3 positions and then we talk about what the best moves are and we kind of compare the best moves to what everybody suggested and wanted to play at different rating ranges. If you want to participate in next week's quiz, there's going to be a link in the description below. You can click that and it'll take you right to the form where you can fill out your answers. But also, you don't have to do that. You can also just pause the video as we go along and participate that way. I think a lot of people actually do that. But yeah, let's jump right in and see these 3 positions. All right, here's position number 1. It is white to play. If you want to pause the video and figure out what you would play and why, go ahead and do that now. I'll give you a few seconds to do that. And if you're ready to see the solutions, here we go. All right, so in the 0 to 1,000 rating category, the top 3 moves we have are rook to d7 check, bishop to c5, and rook to d1. From 1000 to 1600, we actually had a5 being the top move, then rook to d7 check, and then bishop to c5. And then above 1600, we had rook to d7 check, bishop to c5, and then the third choice was a5. All right, so this position actually tricked quite a few people, more than I expected. And the trick was with the move a5. If you said the move a5, you made a very, very big mistake. Now, normally speaking, at the end of the game, if you have passed pawns, which is what this is, a passed pawn, there's no pawns that can stop it from becoming a queen. Pushing it is a good idea, right? So a5, I think a lot of people said because they thought, well, hey, I have a pawn, I should push it. The problem is, in this case, your king is in a weird spot, okay? Your king is kind of trapped, right? You can't go out here because the pawn, and you're sort of surrounded by your own pawns. And black has 2 rooks. And 2 rooks, if they are together, are very, very powerful. And that was the problem with the move a5, because what you are allowing by playing a5 is black to simply go rook to f1, rook f to f1, not this rook, and they're threatening checkmate in 1 move. And you have to ask yourself, okay, how am I going to stop that? Maybe you thought you could play like g4 or g3 and kind of just run. The problem with that is then there's also this. That's just checkmate. Checkmate in 1 move. You can't do that. The only thing that you can do once you get to this position, you can throw in a check, but it doesn't really do anything because the king can just move and you still have the same problem. And then you have to go here and give up one of your rooks. So takes. And now black's probably going to win the game. Maybe you can hold on for a draw if you get lucky, but most likely black's going to just win. So that was the problem with playing a5. You didn't pay attention to this serious problem that you had with your king, okay? So because of that, rook to d7 check and bishop c5 were actually both suitable moves. And they were okay for the same reason, okay? And the reason was that rook d7 check, you were going to have to play anyway. And so it didn't matter if you played it first and then bishop c5, or if you played bishop c5 first and then followed up with rook d7 check later, you were going to get kind of the same position. But the idea here is that if black tries to do the same thing, so doubling up the rooks, going for the checkmate, well, now you can play g4, because remember the checkmate that was there before, it doesn't exist anymore. The bishop's controlling that square. And then this is not checkmate because you have your rooks, you can just block, right? So there's no checkmate for black that way, which means now they can do this, but then you can just run away like we talked about, and your king is escaping, no problems. So that's what you had to see, was that number 1, there was not only this threat, but there was also that sort of secondary checkmate threat, of the rook coming back up if you didn't have your bishop on c5. And again, make sure you notice the rook had to be moved so that the bishop was controlling that. Right? So like if you played bishop c5, sorry, what am I doing here? If you played bishop c5 and then black went here and you just immediately played g4, well, now you just get checkmated, right? You have to throw in this move first, check, because now your bishop controls that square. Okay, so that was the idea. You didn't have time to push your pawn because of that. And this is a very common thing at the end of the game when your king sort of gets in these sort of like it's called a mating net, right, where your king is kind of trapped either on the side of the board or in the corner or boxed in, where there's like pawns kind of controlling the way out. You have to be really careful when there are rooks or queens, right, because those pieces can easily checkmate you. Okay, and so that was kind of the idea here. Even though you're up a piece and you're well ahead, you had to watch out for that. The other thing, a couple people said rook to d1. Rook to d1 does stop, the problems here, but you lose your bishop. So they just take it, and it's probably just going to be a draw at this point. You both have 2 rooks, 3 pawns, and most likely nobody's going to be able to win. So the only way to kind of keep the advantage and keep your winning chances was to go with the bishop c5 and then rook to d7 check. All right, here's position number 2. If you want to pause the video and figure out what you would play for white, go ahead and do that. Black has just played the move knight to d2, and I'll give you a few seconds if you want to pause. And when you're ready, if you want to see the solution, here we go. All right, so 0 to 1000, we had bishop takes a4, knight takes d2, and then the third option was bishop takes h7 check. 1000 to 1600, we had bishop takes a4, then number 2 was bishop takes h7 check, and then number 3 was knight takes d2. And then above 1600, we had most people saying bishop takes a4, and then a couple people saying bishop takes h7 check. All right, so this one was meant to be relatively easy. I just wanted to see how many people got thrown off with the bishop and knight for a rook thing. So if you've never heard this before, but it's always better to have, not always, but 9 times out of 10, it's better to have 2 pieces than a rook if you have the option. And that's exactly what white has the option to do here. Is by taking the bishop, you're letting black take one of your rooks, but let's say they take this one, you're going to get 2 pieces, right? You got the bishop and the knight, and black had the rook. Okay, that's good for you. That's really good for you, because usually a knight and a bishop is going to be better than a rook. Even if it's a rook and a pawn, usually you still want to take the knight and the bishop. So that's kind of what I wanted to see if you knew. If you didn't know that, that's a very good lesson to take going forward. And so that was really, it was really that simple. Take the bishop, and then, you know, of course, they don't want to take your knight, or then you're just up a piece, which is good for you. And then the other move that kind of threw some people off here, knight takes d2, this is basically just a trade. Okay, so you're not getting the knight and bishop for rook, which is good. You're just getting a trade, but you're in a losing endgame. Black has an extra pawn, 3, 6, 7. You only have 6, and they have the bishop, which is probably slightly better than the knight since there's pawns on both sides of the board. So this is really not what you want. And then similarly, bishop takes h7 check. You know, yes, you're getting 1 pawn, and then you're getting the knight, but it doesn't really help you because you're also going to lose this. And black's just crushing you now. You're probably going to lose this endgame. So congratulations if you found bishop takes a4. And for those of you who didn't, make sure you remember going forward that whenever you have an opportunity to get 2 pieces for the rook like this, you should usually go for it. All right, here's position number 3. Black has just played rook to c8. It's white to play. If you want to pause and figure out what you would play for white, go ahead and do that now. Give you a couple seconds. And if you're ready to see the solution, here we go. At 0 to 1000, we had queen to e5 was the top move. Then we had rook takes a7, and then we had queen to g7. 1000 to 1600 was the same 3 moves: queen e5, rook takes a7, and queen g7. And above 1600 was also the same 3 moves: queen e5, rook takes a7, and queen to g7. All right, now this position I thought was going to be a little more tricky for a lot of people. I thought more people were going to get thrown off with like capturing the pawn or going for the, you know, the 7th rank here with queen g7. But a lot of people had the right idea. Queen e5 was the best move. And the reason this is the best move, if you didn't spot this, and this is why any other move that you said was bad, because this is just so good. Queen e5 actually traps black's queen. So check this out. Queen can't go here or here because the rook. Can't go here or here because the pawn and the rook. It can't go here, obviously, because the pawn blocks it. And then all of these are covered by our queen, and then that's defended. So this queen is just trapped. There's nowhere for it to go. Black can throw in this check. It doesn't really do anything. You just slide your king over. There's no more good checks for black. And, you know, you're coming in here next move, so they have to go back. And basically, yeah, computer says mate in 11. So, and the reason is black can't do anything. The queen is just stuck. If you play any other move, going back here, for example, like if you take this pawn, well, now black can take on h5. Queen is no longer trapped. And if the queen's in the game, you know, it's probably going to be a draw, either by perpetual check or even like trading and going into a draw and rook ending, where it's like 3 against 3 here, and then each person has the pawn on the side. Also, queen g7, same kind of idea. You know, you let the queen out. They can just take on h5. They can go here next move, check you, trade, do whatever they want, right? Come down here and start checking you, all kinds of things. So that was the idea. You just had to trap the queen by playing queen e5. And it's just an easy win at that point. So congratulations if you saw that. Like I said, it did not jump out at me right away. And I think a big part of that is the queen is such a powerful piece, especially at the end of the game like this. It's very, very rare that you can actually trap a queen with only 2 pieces. Like, this is a really interesting situation. So it just goes to show, you know, you never want to assume something without actually checking, right? And it has to do with these pawns are kind of awkwardly stopping the queen from moving. So anyway, congratulations if you found that. Very nice move there, queen e5. All right, guys, don't forget, link is in the description below for next week's quiz. As always, thanks for watching. Stay sharp, play smart, and take care.